Hi, my name is Bruce Cain, and today the rant will be the reason that activist Bruce Cain will not be speaking at the 2012 Hash Bash in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I must apologize, my workstation is down, so all I've got to work with is this camera on my laptop. And I'm Bruce Cain, obviously. In general, let me just say that I've been involved in this movement for a very long time, many decades. I used to publish a magazine, and I'm really tired of these people that insist on taxing and regulating marijuana. It's unnecessary, it's stupid. And you'll figure that out by the time you're done with this. Anyway, I asked to speak at the Hash Bash. I've spoken at the Hash Bash about 15 of the last 23 years, and usually it hasn't been a big problem. When I asked Chuck Ream if I could speak, he said a number of things, but basically no. And his last response to me was this. He said, "My God, how could you be cut when you were never considered as a speaker for even a second? Everybody is for free, legal backyard marijuana, but if it was sold, it would be taxed. Doesn't that make sense?" So this is a good way to start out, I think. And here's my reply to Chuck Ream. "I know this may seem a radical thought, Chuck, but no, I don't think cannabis should be taxed. Furthermore, I've purposely been a gadfly in this movement for a reason. I don't think marijuana should be taxed. But in terms of taxation, let's start there. For a government that has told every lie imaginable to wage a war on both cannabis and cannabis consumers, it is the highest form of moral hazard to now reward local, state, and federal governments with tax revenue from cannabis, or as you know it, marijuana. And as Jack Herer, a friend of mine, so famously said, not a fucking dollar to the government from the taxation of marijuana." Those were essentially his last words on the subject, because minutes after that, he collapsed from a heart attack from which he never recovered. That was at Hempstock in 2009. What we should really be doing is what they are already doing in countries like Scandinavia, exempting hemp biomass from taxation in order to push forward with agricultural, industrial, recreational, and medical products that can be made from hemp. Let's grow the goddamn economy. I think your problem is that you're a dispensary owner, and the thought of a black market sales by home growers threatens your bottom line. The movement is now rife with carpetbaggers such as you and DeAngelo, who's going to be speaking at this 2012 Hash Bash. And these people erroneously believe you can mold marijuana policy into a form in which you can profit by imposing a monopoly on the production and distribution of cannabinoid products, from processed herbs to products such as Simpson's oil. And to do that, you're willing to lie down with dogs, that being the state, federal, local governments, and enter into any Faustian bargain that you think might serve your economic interests. You're willing to accept drug testing of drivers that will surely result in the loss of driving rights to thousands of American cannabis consumers. This is a big issue up in Washington with I-502. You're willing to insist on costly regulations, sample testing, police supervision like we have in Colorado, zoning ordinances, etc., in order to ensure that home growers are put out of business. I think Upton St. Clair said it best. He said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it." Isn't that really the problem to you, Chuck Ream, and to you, Steve DeAngelo of Harborside? Isn't that the real problem? The fact of the matter is, settling for the $40 billion per year that could be saved through eliminating any further law enforcement budget for pursuing cannabis producers and consumers makes far more sense. That's basically what Harvard professor Myron said. Forget the tax revenue. That's something Myron already said. He said, tax it. I completely disagree with this Harvard moron. By doing this, by just letting people grow it, not taxing it, and removing the budget for these pigs that are arresting about 1 million American consumers a year, you would accomplish a lot of goals. You would destroy the Mexican drug cartels by robbing them of the 70% of their profits that are derived through the production and sale of marijuana. You would markedly reduce the price of medicine for the sick by removing all taxes, regulations, and government controls. Conversely, taxing, regulating, and controlling the production and distribution of cannabis is likely to make cannabis costs prohibitive for many of those truly sick patients that are unlikely to have the income for their medicine. You would forever end the invasion of our homes and yards by the police instigating grass stings, or as I like to call them, pigs. I have a great respect for legitimate law enforcement, but the war on marijuana is not legitimate law enforcement. That's the bottom line. We have already seen how dumb taxing and regulating cannabis is in the wake of our efforts to successfully defeat Prop 19 in California, something Speaker DeAngelo fully supported. In anticipation of victory of Prop 19 in 2010, towns like Rancho Cordova were set to charge an annual $15,000 fee for the privilege of having a 5-foot by 5-foot growing space. We continue to see the same bullshit in Michigan. Since the passage of the Medical Marijuana Act in 2008, we've seen things like, we've seen the state legislature, which currently trying to gut the 2008 Medical Marijuana Act through a set of 5 draconian bills. And unsurprisingly, useful idiots such as Tim Beck are actually in support of these measures. Zoning ordinance over the last 2 years intended to deny patients and caregivers the right to grow in their own homes as stipulated by the Act. This, by the way, is essentially why Adam Brooke is not emceeing the event this year. He was targeted for speaking up against these practices in Royal Oak, so they put him away for 2 years on frivolous weapon charges. I've known Adam for over 20 years. He's a good guy. This is bullshit. Same thing they did to Mark Emery. These people are political prisoners, and they're being put in jail by police that are acting as global enforcers for global corporations that want to monopolize marijuana. This has got to stop. Then we have the continuous raids of cannabis patients, which I recall it started with this Redden, who had his house broken into, even though he had done all the due diligence to register as a patient or caregiver. And this is happening to hundreds and hundreds of people across the state of Michigan as these asshole pigs are taking their property and putting them in jail and arresting them and ruining their lives. It's not acceptable. Most of the activists I talk to are sick of this bullshit. We had it with these Jim Crow laws that are essentially treating cannabis consumers of all colors, black, white, Hispanic, kind of like the new niggers. You might say we cannabis consumers are all niggers now. We're sick of seeing President Obama playing the race card when in fact he's probably the most racist president we've had in U.S. history. After all, it is minorities that are most affected by cannabis prohibition. It is Mexican citizens that are getting slaughtered by the thousands because of this despicable excuse for a president who won't simply legalize the goddamn weed. I'm going to include a music video I did to illustrate that point further. Don't watch it on a full stomach. I also found it unfortunate to hear your other hash bash planner, Charmie Gholson, expressing joy over the fact they are busting white people. This is also unacceptable, and some might even argue it to be racist in its own right. No one should be getting busted for growing or consuming marijuana, and I'll include that podcast so you can listen to it for yourself. Sorry, but I'm not jiggy with this crap anymore. And people like yourself and DeAngelo that are willing to keep feeding the prohibitionist beast are essentially supporting this crap. So Chuck, how about we admit that cannabis is probably the safest therapeutic agent known to man? That, by the way, is essentially a quote from DEA Administrative Law Judge Young, who back in '89 was summarily fired after reaching this astounding conclusion. We are not mining plutonium here, Chuck. We do not need any taxation, regulation, or government control. You got it? And let us not forget the premise of Jack Herer's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Jack was a good friend of mine for over 20 years. The primary reason that marijuana became illegal was to protect the oil, paper, and synthetics industry from competition from hemp agriculture and industry. Taxing, regulating, and controlling cannabis will only make things worse, as it will monopolize control of production and distribution. I'm sorry to disagree with you, Chuck, but taxing and regulating cannabis, or marijuana, is not the solution. It's the goddamn problem. The reason you're so willing to bend over and accept this taxation, same with DeAngelo, is not because you give a damn about the producers and consumers of cannabis. In fact, you see the home grower as a threat to your monopolistic dispensary model. The reason you're willing to accept this is because you erroneously believe that somehow it'll resurrect the dispensary model that's been stripped out from under you by our legislators. And you're a dispensary owner, isn't that right, Chuck? You had better serve this movement by ending your retirement and going back to teaching kindergartners. The fact of the matter is that globalist municipal leagues are conspiring nationally to deprive home growers of their inalienable right to grow, gift, and sell their cannabis overage. Adam and I discussed this before he was sentenced. The fact of the matter is that Obama is in the pockets of Monsanto, GW Pharmaceuticals, the upcoming producer of Sativix, and other corporations that know full well the only way that they can make a profit is that if you and I are deprived of our right to grow. The bottom line is that NORML, Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, ASA, law enforcement against prohibition, LEAP, they all continue to essentially support the dispensaries and big pharma. Now, while nearly 1 million cannabis consumers and producers continue to get arrested every year. And this is why Alan St. Pierre, Kevin Stroop, and others are increasingly coming under attack from their fellow activists. We're fed up with the ineptitude of these organizations. 2. Not allowing me or probably anybody else that opposes any form of taxation to speak is very predictable. I have been involved in the marijuana movement since 1968 when I first smoked at the age of 14. By 1970, most of America's youth fervently believed that it was a matter of years before marijuana would be legalized and we could simply grow our own. Yet, here we are 44 years later, and things have only got worse due to the lack of leadership from groups like NORML. The number of arrests and property forfeitures have skyrocketed, and NORML attorneys have made billions of dollars, I'm sure. And every step forward has been followed by at least 2 steps back. We're getting nowhere with this strategy. The fact is, there is a dichotomy in this movement that you refuse to recognize. There are people like yourself that willingly support the taxation and regulation of cannabis because you have this pipe dream that you will be able to make your dispensaries profitable by denying home growers full access to the market. You castigate the home grower as a criminal because they would assuredly limit the profits you could make through a tax and regulate scheme, which local, state, and federal governments will surely help you with. Then there are people like myself, Jack Herrera, Dennis Perrone, Joe Petrie, and a host of others that are vehemently opposed to allow lying, scheming governments to profit from the monopolization of cannabis. You seem to have succeeded in making sure those voices will no longer be heard at the Hash Bash. You had the audacity to say that I had never spoken at the Hash Bash, and the fact of the matter is, I've spoken at 15 of the last 23 events. I sent you 2 YouTube videos of my previous speeches at the Hash Bash, to disprove your assertions. So it appears I will not be speaking. But that does not mean I'll be silenced in any significant way. I'm thinking of recapping this entire incident in a number of YouTube videos. You might count this as the first. Some of my videos have received over 5,000 viewings, more than the number of Hash Bash attendees at many former events, especially those where it snowed. I don't dislike you as a person, Chuck. I don't dislike you as a person either, Steve DeAngelo. But I do disagree with your strategy and your tax and regulate solution. And so do millions of other activists. And the fact of the matter is, over 50% of America right now wants marijuana fully legalized. And we are the fucking people. Obama better start understanding that. DeAngelo better start understanding that. And Chuck Green better start understanding it. We're the people. We want it legal. Get over it. We are no longer going to allow the moneyed organizations to call the tune. It's time for a real solution. And that solution necessitates the full declassification of cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Something we should have been working on decades ago. Because this bullshit has got to end. And your tax and regulate solutions are only going to make things worse. And most of the cannabis producers and consumers are getting sick and tired of things getting worse. We want to see things getting better. It reminds me of the old Beatles tune, I've got to admit it's getting better, or getting better. In the lyrics that get me is, I've got to admit it's getting better, a little better all the time, and the refrain is, it can't get much worse. Well, the fact of the matter is, it can always get more worse. But it can also get better if we act in a focused manner. Back in the late 60s, we were gamed and we lost our focus. That does not mean we are relegated to the same fate this time around. And if we have any brains, we're not going to allow monopolists like Chuck Reams and Steve DeAngelo of Harborside to game us this time around. I'm just saying. Change can happen if we really want it. But first of all, we have to put our heads out of the sand and recognize that taxing and regulating cannabis is not the solution, but rather just a new form of prohibition. So let me get back to your last email, Chuck, where you said, "My God, how could you be cut when you were never considered as a speaker for even a second? Everybody is for free legal backyard marijuana, but if it was sold, it would be taxed. Doesn't that make sense?" Well, Chuck, let me summarize it for you. 1, you cut me because you don't want anyone that is against taxation, regulation, and government control to speak at the Hash Bash, something I've done at 15 of the last 23 events. And you want to silence people like myself because it is possible that if we can all grow our own, there just might not be a big need for dispensaries. Secondly, taxing marijuana does not make any sense when you really begin to analyze it. In fact, the greater good of society would be much better served if we could all grow it, gift it, and sell it without any fucking tax or government involvement. And essentially all I'm really demanding is a free market for the production and distribution of cannabis. I thought we were all for a free market. Got it, Chuck? Got it, Steve DeAngelo? I kind of doubt it. So anyway, don't let me speak, Chuck. After all, I apparently have nothing intelligent to add to the debate. I've just been publishing a magazine from 80 to 97. I only started the International Drug Policy Day that predated the Global Marijuana March. No, I haven't done nothing. Really, Chuck? Really, Steve DeAngelo? Your days are numbered. The activists in this country are tired of normal, DPA and MPP and other organizations pulling the wool over our eyes. We've had it. The war's got to end. We need to do this for the Mexican people. We need to do it for the sick. We need to do it for the minorities that are primarily getting arrested and are incarcerated for this. The nightmare needs to end. And I believe that a hemp economy may very well go a long way to ending our dependence on foreign oil. And to that end, if you like playing the lottery, you can write me in for president this year, because I don't see any good choices, and you'll hear about more of this later. So anyway, it's my rant for today. I hope my workstation is up so I can do some videos of higher quality than this, and I wish you all a good weekend. Thank you very much.